Welcome back to the Doll Mom podcast. Today is such a fantastic episode. I am so excited for this. I've been looking forward to this all week. Today we have on Dr. Robert Jason Grant.
Hello everyone listening. Glad to be here.
Now, for those of you who don't know, and you're like, Mal, why are we having a doctor on? This is my uncle, y'all. And I am super duper excited. So we'll get into kind of more on what he does, but he plays a major role with toys in his career. And so I'm so excited to talk about that. He's just a guest that I am just beyond excited to have on. And he's also someone in my personal life that I just look up to. And I kind of feel like I get a lot of my creative stuff with him. Because he's all the time writing books and posting stuff on social media. He's traveling, so I feel like I get a lot of my creative stuff from him. So anyways, I'm just super duper excited to have him on today. We're going to be talking about what he does a little bit, and then we're going to be talking about using dolls and therapy and different stuff like that and how they help people. So I'm super duper excited for this meaningful episode. So I feel without further ado, let's get started. So, Dr. Grant, can you introduce yourself to our listeners and share a little bit about your journey into play therapy?
Sure, happy to. And thanks for having me on to talk about this. I am a licensed mental health professional, and more specifically, what's called a registered play therapist. So I'll work with kids primarily in mental health and do a lot of play therapy related theories and approaches, techniques, where basically we use play in the therapy process for young kids, older kids. And this is kind of my day job, is running what we call the AutPlay Therapy clinic, where we work with kids and families on all kinds of mental health needs and issues. A big component, I guess, of my professional career, but I do also write and do trainings on the topic of play therapy, and specifically working with kids who we'd put in the neurodivergent category, autistic kids, kids with sensory differences, ADHD, things like this.
Nice. So for someone who does not have a clue about play therapy, what is it?
That's a great question, because some people do wonder, what the heck is that? I don't know what that is. So it's mental health therapy for kids. It's came about is taking existing psychological and counseling theories that already existed, that we know to use with people to help them with different needs, and then taking those theories and making them developmentally appropriate for kids. And so we can do mental health with kids in ways that speak to where kids are. And kids obviously learn and process and explore and grow through play. We know that about play. It has all these benefits. So we utilize play mixed with our counseling theories and approaches to help address whatever mental health needs or issues the child is struggling with. It could be anxiety, it could be depression, it could be social issues, it could be even adjusting to parents getting a divorce, anything that may come in that the child is needing some help with. We can utilize these play therapy theories and approaches to help them. And that, of course, then gets into play, and play involves toys, games, movement, art, all the ways that kids play. So a typical play therapist would have what we call a play therapy room or space that is full of various toys and materials that we would use in our play therapy work.
I love that. And, tying that back with American Girl dolls, they have so many awesome stories and characters that kind of coordinate with that too. I know with Julie, she's from the 70s. Her book talks about her parents going through a divorce. So there's a lot of I feel like tie-ins with that with American Girl. Do you use American Girl dolls?
I do and have. Sometimes it is the client, this is a way that they play, this is their interest. And so they bring that in. to the play therapy work. They may bring a special or important American Girl doll with them to the play session. They may want to show us their book or backstory or talk about it or use it even in the play, use the doll in the play. I've had kids do that. And then there are a few American Girl items that I have acquired through the years just to have in the playroom or something I can access for certain kids if I think it will be helpful for them.
I love that. And I would like to say, everyone, like, he does have a good toy collection for his patients, which I appreciate personally. As a toy collector, I think it's really neat.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. I try. Variety is nice.
So, how did you first come to use them in your therapy practice?
So dolls in general, toys of all kinds, of course, but dolls specifically, we do have there's sort of like, again, these various counseling theories and approaches. So we have these different play therapy theories and approaches, but they all have usually a recommended toy and material list for setting up your playroom or play space. And they all include dolls of some kind. And a lot of them focus on baby dolls and having, more than one of different diversity that you would have in your room. So kids could come in and be like, oh, that reminds me of me or my younger sibling, or I want to use that doll in the play in some way. Also, any other type of doll that might be useful. I think a lot of therapists have try to get a set of family dolls. So there is a mom figure, dad figure, kid figure in doll form as well. So those are pretty standard. We probably have those in our playroom for kids to come in. And then beyond that, it really is sort of therapist selection. If you we're all notorious for like being in toy stores, all these adults are the ones buying the toys and not giving them to our own kids, but taking them into a playroom that we're trying to stock. But if you run across an item, like if I run across a doll that I think, wow, I just think this would be really good to have in my playroom and would be significant for some of the kids I work with, I'll purchase it and I'll add it into the playroom. And so with American Girl specifically, I don't have a specific American Girl doll in the playroom. I do have some of the books, which I know we'll talk about,
Mm-hmm.
and then some of the accessory items because they make some things for disability, which would relate to some of the kids that I work with. So items like that we do have in there.
I love that. I feel like American Girl is one of those brands that they really draw attention to everyone and they want to make sure that their products are for everyone. So I really love like their diverse efforts when it comes to making toy products, which we'll kind of get into that a little bit later in the episode as
Yes.
well.
Doll play and dolls of, any and all variety and type do have a special kind of significance for a lot of kids and can generate a lot of specific play and play that, we can use very nicely in therapy because you're really oftentimes looking at a doll, whether it's American Girl or other form or type, that is sort of a representation that means something to the child. They connect with this doll in some way. They relate to it, or it represents something to them about their self or their life or their dreams or something that has this great benefit to them in their play. So it's really nice to have that component in our playrooms because dolls do get played with a lot often and used a lot by honestly both girls and boys, especially young kids. And you see a lot of therapeutic things getting worked on through that doll play. So it's really a great topic that we're talking about here
Yes.
on your podcast because it's connecting these two worlds.
Yeah, and I feel like most people don't really know about it, you know? Like, we just, especially doll collectors, like, we collect dolls. We don't really think too much into it. Like, we don't really see, I guess, the deeper meaning that dolls can bring to others. And so I really love having these conversations where it's more than just a doll sitting on a shelf. Like, it's so much more than just picking her up and changing her clothes. Like, there's so much
Yes.
underlining meaning and just special significance about it. So now we're going to be talking about how American Girl dolls can be used in therapy in depth more. And one of the things that I really want to talk about is the books, which we have not discussed the American Girl doll books on the podcast before. So I'm really excited to talk about them because they're basically like the line. Like, that is how American Girl came to be when Pleasant Rowland was developing American Girl. So how do American Girl dolls, especially with their backstories and books, help children express feelings or work through experiences?
It's a great question. And by the way, you put together really smart questions for this,
Oh, thank
which we
you.
did not discuss. You came up
No,
with them on your
I
own. And
was like, you came to me with the idea, which honestly, if we're going to be real, I already had like you in my mind to ask to come on the podcast at
uh-huh.
some point. And so you came to me with the idea, and I was like, okay, yes, I love this. And I was like, okay, trying to figure out questions that kind of fit the same idea. You know what I mean? Like, taking your idea, because making sure that we were on like the same page with it. So that was
Yes.
it was
Yeah.
a little bit difficult to come up with questions. I was like, okay,
Yeah.
but
I
thank
was
you so much.
impressed because
Thank
I'm like,
you.
wow, my introduction therapeutically to American Girl doll. Now, I do have a niece who you know, who introduced me to
That's
the
me,
dolls
y'all.
very, very early on in life. In terms of being introduced therapeutically, it was through the books. That was my first introduction because I found the feelings book that they produce. And I'm always looking for feelings books. I mean, that's just a big thing that we wind up working with kids on. So, what's a book that has some ideas, some techniques, some strategies, some information? I opened this book. I was thinking, I don't know what I'm going to get. Am I just going to get a story about, you know, some child who had a feeling? I was impressed. I bought the book. I mean, I'm like, wow, there's really good content in here that I can use with kids in therapy. And I've used that book and I've used things out of the book with kids who didn't even have an interest in American Girl. And then, of course, it's great when there's a child that comes in who likes American Girl because I'm like, oh, well, did you know they have a feelings book? And they're instantly intrigued. So there's instant buy in to kind of go through this feelings book because it's already like a brand that they like and they're really interested in. So that was my first introduction was this book. And then I started looking at, well, what else do they have that I could use in therapy? From the book standpoint, I'm really impressed. I mean, there's a lot of good books. So there's a healthy library, first of all. And one of the things that the brand does that's really impressive is they really do cover topics in their book. These books aren't, just silly stories. They really put meaning behind the topics. There's a book on divorce. I've seen that one and step families. That's done really well. There's multiple books on friendships and navigating peer relationships. Of course, the feelings book. There's a feelings journal. There's a lot of things that have great education pieces to them. I think parents would even appreciate getting for their kids and going through with their kids. Certainly, I share these resources with other therapists because I know they would be good for them in their child and play therapy work.
There's just so many topics that American Girl has covered. Not only like with the different books, we haven't really discussed it on the podcast. So for someone who's just getting into American Girl dolls and has no idea what we're talking about, so not only do they have the dolls, but they have like specific character books that kind of coordinate with the dolls. But then
Yes.
they have this whole other branch, which is it's kind of like the Smart Girls Guide books, but they don't really theme some of the books as Smart Girl Guides because the feeling book, that's not. Then they have like the Smart Girls Guide, which is kind of advice, lifestyle
Yeah.
books. Like we have the friendships, but then we also have like dealing with online stuff, like the
Mhm.
internet, and like there's crushes, and like there's dealing with boys and like different things like that. So it's not only just doll play, it's a whole kind of life journey helping you along as you grow up and experience
Yeah.
childhood and adulthood and teenagers, you know?
I'm glad you brought that up because there is that whole category of books that go with the dolls, their story, which is a
Mhm.
whole nother element you can get into. And a lot of these books that I was referencing, I think of them more as sort of like resource books, really.
Mhm.
Yeah, they're sort of situational, topical, but they're not written in a boring way like a textbook. They're written in a really engaging way for the reader, and that's what I really like about them and like about them for, like you mentioned, kids, teens, whoever's picking up the book to access it. And they have them on their website. I mean, that's where I go and look and see what all do they have. They have a whole section. But I have used the doll books before. I have used those, not specifically myself going and buying them, but when a child will bring them in, they'll bring in maybe the book and want to share the story of the doll with me. And I'm always looking for, okay, this has meaning for this child. There's something about this doll's story they're connecting to and they're relating to. And oftentimes we'll spend some time diving into that. And I'll ask them those kinds of questions. What is it about, her story or his story that you really like? What do you connect to in this story? Is there something here that reminds you of you or your life? I've done that a few times, especially with the kids who bring in that play interest into the playroom. And that's very unique because a lot of, just kind of quote unquote dolls that you could go buy do not have that element with them. They're not defined like this, like American Girl does.
I do not think I would be the person that I am today without American Girl books personally. Like they're just amazing, and they're like good for anyone, like at any age. Like it's just a good reminder just to go back and read stuff. And not only for that, but if you are working with children, like if you're becoming a teacher or like becoming in a role that has more of like a working with children aspect, like they're great to like kind of identify and connect with the children that you're working with.
I like that. They're thoughtful.
Mhm.
These are thoughtfully put together, complete kind of packages.
Yeah. I think it's for the resource books as well, but I know with the historical character books, they have a advisory board that helps American Girl not only make sure that the doll is like historically accurate, but also like the book. So why do you think dolls, especially American Girl dolls, can be such a powerful tool in therapy with children?
Kind of like how I was mentioning earlier, I think there's just a connection that naturally happens. You know, dolls are like representing a human. And so there's this greater connection often versus maybe like a toy car or a toy, giraffe, which, are great too. But I think with dolls, there's this more powerful connection because it's the representation of another human. And so kids can find again themselves in this doll. They can use the doll to maybe play out what has happened in their life that has been maybe upsetting or traumatic. They can use the doll to work on nurturing and to express even what they wish they were getting or needing from other people. And that's kind of true for any type of doll. And then with American Girl, you have the added element of there being quote, a quote unquote real person in this doll, right? They
Mhm.
have a name, they have a personality, they have a style, they have a backstory, like you mentioned, and then that takes the connection sometimes even further for the child as they can use that doll to explore their own life, their future goals, their past pains that they're trying to overcome. It just becomes a really powerful tool in the playroom for working on some of our mental health goals.
Could you, if you're able to, could you walk us through an example of a time when a child connected deeply with a doll in therapy?
Yeah, I'll try to give you a couple of examples. I will be sensitive not to get into super specifics, but enough
Yes.
to get an idea here. And I'll kind of give an example of a more generic doll and then also an American Girl example.
Okay, I love that.
So we have, of course, as I mentioned, baby dolls always. That's a standard. I remember this client, and actually, this is could probably describe a combination of several clients. Young child, around age 4 or 5, who came in for therapy in foster care, rough background in terms of neglect. And this child's go to toy was the baby doll. And this wasn't a big surprise to me, given the age, given the issues. This child gravitated toward nurturing play. So there was a routine every session of going and getting this baby doll, and then the baby doll had to be dressed, changed, fed, walked, rocked, and put to sleep and held. It was this manifestation of like what this child had not gotten, this nurturing that they were still craving, and being able to process through sort of the loss of that and almost through the play correcting it, and through correcting it with this doll, which was, a manifestation of them. And things like that can be so powerful in the play for the child. And then, of course, that's always connected with the therapeutic relationship with the therapist, who's staying attuned, who's tracking what they're doing, is co-regulating with them as they're going through this play that can kind of sometimes be intense for them. But themes came up with this baby doll, not just the nurturing and the care, but also there were times where the baby was being neglected. The baby was not being taken care of, and the expression of feelings through the child, through the baby. Like, this baby's really sad right now because nobody's helping the baby. There'd be statements like this where you can see the child working through their mental health needs. So that's sort of one example. And then I'll give an example of American Girl doll. I don't remember the doll's name. I'm not the expert on the dolls. That's the podcast host here. This was something they really liked. They liked American Girl, and they liked collecting dolls and items. So I was like, oh, well, why don't you like bring in your favorite and show me? I'm always doing that when kids have something they're really interested in. So they brought in their doll and they showed it to me and told me about it. I knew at that point enough from our wonderful podcast host here that this doll probably had a book that went with it. So I was like, does your doll have a book? And do you have it? And they're like, oh yeah. And I'm like, bring that book in. Like, let's read it. Let's look at all this. And so they did. And that was kind of like what I was sharing earlier. This was one of the cases where we went through the story together, and this was over the span of multiple sessions, of course. And then I started, doing some kind of processing questions with them. Why do you like this style so much? And what are you connected to here? Why this doll over some of the others? And what do you really like in the story? What does it mean to you? And then we got into some really nice self-worth building exercises, which was one of our therapy goals, because we started talking about in what ways do you admire about your doll and their story that you wish were more like you? And we started kind of asking these more self worth building questions, and then being able to explore that with the child in terms of valuing themselves more and how can they feel better about themselves and what their strengths are and what their abilities are and what they can do. But that's a couple of general examples. It can vary per child, of course, because we're letting them go where they want to go with it.
Oh, I love that. That's so like powerful. Oh my goodness. I was kind of tearing up a little bit because I just thought it was just, people I feel like don't realize just how powerful dolls can truly be, you know? What has using dolls in therapy taught you as a therapist and as a person?
Oh gosh, this is a big question.
We're kind of getting deep a little bit.
We are. I gotta really think about this one. I mean, I value them in therapy, of course, and I don't think I'd ever set up a playroom without doll representation in it. Of course, I think it's a necessary item that we would want to have in our playroom. So, as a therapist, I really see the value, and of course, being in therapy quite a while, I have now several examples of that, so I know that this is important and there's a lot of value in dolls and doll play. As a person, I feel like it provides so much good growth and development play. I think it's important to really have this as a type of play that you do introduce to your child and allow your child to do. One of the things because there's no substitute for here is this sort of representation of human in doll form and all the things that can mean and manifest as in good developmental play. And the thing that I guess I would add here, which is veering a little bit off the question, but it's related, is I hate it when people say, doll play is exclusive to little girls, because
Yes.
I think that we're not understanding, we're as adults are putting like a gender label. Toys exist in all kinds and shapes to be explored by all kids without going, oh, I can't play with that toy because I'm a boy. I can't play with that toy because I'm a girl. That's not what play is intended to be. Play is free abandonment, where you can just go do naturally and instinctually the kind of play you want to do. And then it's going to produce all these good developmental growth things for you. You're going to learn how to process through things that bother you, how to be creative, how to problem solve, how to socialize. We just need to stop discouraging. If there is a little boy who wants to play with a baby doll, don't come take it away from him and say, that's only for little girls. He's not even looking at it that way. He's looking at it as there's some benefit I'm going to get out of playing with this doll that I'm interested in. And so that's one thing that I would hope to encourage parents more in. Like, don't get so uptight about what your child is playing with, especially young kids.
Okay, so we are now going to get into the more like Pacific American Girl resources, and we're also going to be getting into other doll lines too, which this was something I kind of wanted to talk about because I think it's really impactful that doll brands are being so kind of diverse and kind of making
Yes.
products that's for everyone. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what I wanted to discuss in this kind of segment. What resources does American Girl offer, and how have you?
So this is a really important question, and I think it's super relevant for me in play therapy work because we do think a lot about in that playroom setup, the toy material selection. We do think a lot about diversity. We think a lot about representation because we're going to have all kinds of different kids coming in to see us. And so I specifically look at, is a child who has a disability going to find certain things in the playroom that represent them, or how would we represent a child who's autistic or an ADHD, or because that matters to kids. It matters if they can come in and see a doll that looks like them, or see a miniature that looks like them, or whatever it may be. So this is something I did my own research too.
Oh, I love that.
Yes, this is something that I have specifically looked at in American Girl. I usually do in general anyway, to see what they had in terms of these kinds of pieces of representation. And interestingly, they have a lot of items that represent different disability and different kind of neuro differences. They have a lot of mobility devices you can buy, like wheelchairs and arm crutches. They have hearing aids. There's a lot of items like this that can just be purchased. So those would be nice to even just have in a playroom, even if you didn't have the doll to go with them, because they would still be these items that the child could come in, and if they used a wheelchair and they saw a wheelchair and a doll, that would just have a meaning to them that, hey, look, there's something in here that represents me. This person must understand something about me, and that's important to kids. This is the research that I did for this podcast.
Oh,
And I
okay.
discovered, okay, I'm not the expert, so listeners
Okay.
don't write in hate mail. I may
Okay.
get the names
Okay.
wrong,
It's
but
okay.
you'll help me.
I'm here to like help. Okay,
You're here
like
to help.
I will correct. Okay, like I am.
Okay, I
Yeah.
I found this doll, and I believe the name is the Josh Kendrick doll.
Yes, Girl
That
of the
it's
Year
supposed,
2020.
yes, who is supposed to wear hearing aids, I believe, and sort of represent, disability in this way or a difference in this way. And I thought, oh, that's really cool. They've actually kind of created a doll to kind of represent a difference that may be, like the real child. And they can get a doll that is similar to them and has a story similar to them. And I thought that was really cool. And my research, I think, brought me to, I don't think you can get this doll anymore unless you find it like used somewhere. But it sounds like you can, even if you're not like finding a specific doll that's exactly like you or your child, there's this opportunity to create that in the
Yeah.
American Girl line.
Yeah. I really love how American Girl kind of just takes it in different ways. Like you can get a doll that looks like you, but you can also get a doll that is personality driven. Like that's just like you in that
Yes.
way too.
Yeah, and you mentioned other brands and lines and
Yes, which we're going to get
work that they're
into
doing.
as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if America Girl could design a resource or doll specifically for therapy, what would you love to see?
I would love to, and this would be very hard to do, I think, because I've thought about this, and I know it'll kind of lead into a future question, but I would love to see them design at least a doll who maybe had a story, because there isn't really like one look to this, who is autistic or who's an ADHD or has sensory differences. There isn't obviously a specific look to that, with the way that American Girl creates a whole story and can, with a doll, from accessories to a book to everything. They're creating this whole, who this doll is. It's probably possible to create a doll in that category. That would be really cool, because obviously that would be useful for a lot of the clients I see, and there are a lot of neurodivergent kids out there, and I think seeing that representation is nice. It's just a challenge because you can't do something physically to represent neurodivergence, but so it would have to be more in the story and the personality. But American Girl does that well, so they would be a brand who probably could pull something like that off.
I definitely think they could. With the amount of resources and the amount of work that they put into the dolls, with the whole advisory board and like meeting with so many people, not only in like a company standpoint to make sure the doll gets approved, but also like to make sure that like outside the company, they bring in people who have background and knowledge within that field already, and to have background and knowledge with an educational field too, to make sure that the doll is educationally great. And they just put so much effort into it. And I encourage listeners to do their own research with it, because I'm not really that knowledgeable about all the efforts that they go into creating dolls, but I know they put a ton of work into it with all the advisory board, and they even have the advisory board listed in the back of the historical characters books. So you can even
Yeah,
see who's on that and do your own research
that's
on
nice.
who's. They do just a ton of work with the dolls, and I highly recommend everyone to do their own research doing that, because I think you will be impressed with the amount of detail that they put in. Like, it's not just words that they say, it's actual physical actions that they do. We're going to be moving into some other doll brands right now. We're going to be moving into Barbie. We're going to kind of talk about the 18-inch world a little bit more as well. But with Barbie, they recently released a art therapy playset, which every time I see it in Target, I think of you. I don't know. It's just something I just associate
Yes.
with. So that is one thing that I feel like we should discuss on kind of like your thoughts on the impact of not only that, but I know My Life As a couple years ago, which this is kind of a controversial doll, which I don't know if we want to talk about the controversy regarding the doll, but they
Okay.
released a autism advocate doll as well. So we've had some representation in the doll community, but what are your thoughts over the impact of these kinds of dolls being available to the public, to kids, to people in general?
Well, I love the Barbie doll. I mean, wonderful, great idea. Let's make a Barbie play therapist. Let's make a Barbie art therapist. Let's make a Barbie social worker. Let's make them all, because how cool for kids to see these career representations in doll form, and then to even play that out, being in that career and doing that work. Why not? I mean, I love that idea. And I remember seeing that actually when that first came out, it widely went around play therapy groups that I was in. And I'm sure a lot of play therapists even bought it, maybe for themselves more than their playroom, who knows? But I love that concept and idea in general, and I think we need more of that. We need more representation in. I think specifically dolls do a better job with that than other categories of toys, of like representing, who you can be, what you can do, in the quote unquote real world. And I love when I see designers do that.
In your experience, do dolls that focus on advocacy or emotional roles, like, being the therapist, being an advocate, etc., help with play therapy or with kind of normalizing conversations about mental health and accepting others?
I would say 100%. You know, in the mental health community, one of the battles that we've always had since probably the beginning of mental health care is stigmatization, and getting past this idea that there's something bad or wrong with you or shameful if you're seeking out mental health care, which is not true at all. And getting people past that stigmatization so they're comfortable seeking out mental health care when they really could benefit from it or when they really need it is huge. And we've made some strides in that area, but it still exists. And I think, you know, having experiences through dolls that represent, here's an art therapist, here's a play therapist, or, here's a playroom kit, a therapy playroom play therapy kit. These are things that kids then can play with, and it doesn't then feel weird or strange that then maybe when they're going to see a play therapist or an art therapist or a music therapist or whatever, it's something that they've already been exposed to through their play, through their toys, they see the representation. That helps get rid of the stigmatization. It probably even helps adults too. Adults who might have some stigmatization, and then they see these toys they can buy their kids, and their kids are asking for them, for a birthday or Christmas. And they're like, oh, this is okay. This isn't a weird thing. This isn't something to feel shame about. It's just a normal thing that somebody may go do that could actually be very beneficial to them.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like it's like a full circle moment. Like, not only is it helping children, it's helping children around them. It's helping children, like, that's not even their age. It's helping adults. It's helping, adults' peers. Like, it's helping even, like, the person who puts it on the shelf, like, they're seeing,
Yeah,
oh,
absolutely.
yeah, it's more than just a child that's being exposed to it and learning the acceptance of it. So, what work do you think needs to be done in the doll industry, which we kind of discussed a little bit, representing mental health and slash or neurodiversity?
Oh gosh. I mean, at this point, it almost feels like the possibilities are endless because it doesn't really get much specific representation. That doesn't mean a child can't just go there on their own. A child can come into the playroom and grab a nondescript doll and decide that that doll is autistic in their play, which kids do sometimes, and that's great. But I think in terms of what we're doing in the doll industry, from what I've seen, there's tons because there's not much that has been done really. You did your research and we saw even what you found. I mean, there
Yeah.
isn't necessarily a lot of options. So there's lots of places to go. We would look at it on the positive side and say there's a lot of possibilities that
Mhm.
exist and opportunities because we haven't done much. But I do want to emphasize again that it is tricky because we're talking about concepts that don't necessarily have a physical look. We could say, hey, could doll brands do a better job of creating boy dolls that play football? And then we could say yes, and then we know exactly what that's going to look like. When we talk about representing neurodivergence, or we talk about even representing somehow the mental health concept, there isn't a way we can physically design the doll that I can think of. It's more about how we bring the other pieces around the doll together, similarly to what is done oftentimes in American Girl with their dolls. Obviously, we could do a better job, which is a cleaner line of maybe representing different disabilities with dolls. That is something that I do see more and more. I see that kind of emerging more and more, probably because it's easier for the designers to conceptualize this doll. When you're kind of conceptualizing something that doesn't have one unified physical look, that's harder to do. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't explore it. Somebody's going to figure it out and be able to design it well, and we'll have good doll representation. And I think that that is a worthwhile pursuit, not because kids can't play with any doll. They certainly can. And I see that all the time in play therapy. Kids will come in and grab any doll and they'll make it whatever they want it to be. And kids do that in play, and that's wonderful. But there is something special about walking in and seeing a doll that looks like you, or is similar to you, or reminds you of you. There is something special about that for kids as well.
I agree. Like, I remember when I was little, American Girl, they had dolls that looked like me. Got really excited. And, like, with the character dolls, the one that really looked like me when I was little was Molly. I didn't wear the glasses. I didn't have gray eyes, but I had the bangs and I had the hair color. And I think that's kind of why I really loved Molly growing up because, we kind of connected. She looks like me. And I remember I think I used this example before on the podcast, but when Taylor Swift got bangs, that was
Hmm.
like a life changer for me because there was no other
Yeah.
person who I listened to besides Hannah Montana. But that was, I remember just being like, oh my God, she looks like me. Like, there's someone who I listen to who kind of has like a platform that has bangs. Like, I remember just freaking out over that because, she like looked like me, and it was kind of like, okay, well then I can do this too. Like I can like do my own way, like whatever, I can do anything. So I just think it's just so important for children to kind of see themselves and to have those experiences being like, oh my gosh.
I mean, that's a great example of connecting with your young child and illustrating how meaningful that can be, when you have that experience. And that's the reason to encourage more of this.
Okay, I say this every time because it's so beyond true, but I just get so sad when we get to the end of recording an episode because I really enjoy our conversation, especially with this one. I just feel like it's just so powerful, so meaningful, and I really hope you as the listener who is listening to this right now was able to get something out of this conversation, inspired to do something. I want to thank my uncle, Dr. Jason Grant, for coming on the Doll Mom podcast. It was such a blast having you on. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I had a great time.
If you all are more interested in what he does, seeing his work that he does, it's amazing. It's incredible. I highly recommend checking him out. It is www.AutPlayTherapy.com. I have linked it down below in this description of this podcast episode. So if you want to go check him out, you can do so. Go give him some love. He's amazing. His work is incredible. I love him so much as a family member and as a non-family member. So, there's that. Okay, my name is Mal. I am at Dollies and Rainbows on Instagram, YouTube. We're pretty much all over the internet. But someone that you should definitely check out is my Doll Mom podcast, social media platforms. We're trying to grow, we're trying to thrive, all that. It is at Doll Mom Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. We're on Threads. It is a blast on there. So you should definitely go give us a follow, give us some love on there as well. And yeah, thank you so much to the listener, to you who is listening to this podcast. You've officially made it to the end with us. I really appreciate your listen, all of your love and support regarding my podcast. Yeah, that's really all that I have to say regarding the end of this episode. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!
Bye, everyone.